The early morning of December 7th, 1941, was marked by an unusual stillness over Pearl Harbor. The sun was just beginning to rise, casting a warm golden hue across the Pacific waters. Suddenly, the sharp sound of aircraft engines pierced the tranquility, reverberating against the mountains that cradled the harbor. As the first wave of Japanese planes descended, the vibrant blue sky turned ominous, filled with the dark silhouettes of war. A question hangs heavy in the air. How could such a devastating attack unfold in the heart of America, a nation presumed untouchable? This paradox of vulnerability amidst strength reveals a deeper truth about warfare. This episode isn't about the attack on Pearl Harbor itself. It's about the invisible forces that decide wars. In the years leading up to the attack on Pearl Harbor, both the United States and Japan were entrenched in their beliefs about military power and strategy. The United States, emerging from World War I, viewed itself as a dominant global force. The military doctrine emphasized naval power and the ability to project that power across the oceans. The U.S. Navy focused on the strength of its battleships and the belief that they could deter any potential aggressor. As the world moved into the 1930s, Japan, facing economic pressures and limited resources, adopted a different perspective. They believed that their survival depended on expansion in Asia, which would provide the raw materials necessary to fuel their war machine. Prior to the attack, Japanese military planners meticulously studied the United States' naval capabilities. They believed that a surprise attack could cripple the American fleet at Pearl Harbor, thus giving Japan the upper hand in the Pacific. This belief was rooted in the notion that the U.S. was complacent and unprepared for a conflict. Japanese intelligence reports indicated that the U.S. was distracted by internal politics and the growing tensions in Europe. The prevailing sentiment in Tokyo was that time was running out, and decisive action was necessary to secure their imperial ambitions. Meanwhile, American military leaders were equally confident in their assessments. They considered an attack on Pearl Harbor improbable, viewing the vastness of the Pacific Ocean as a natural barrier. The belief was that any enemy would have to overcome significant logistical challenges to reach the U.S. mainland. Consequently, security measures were lax, and many personnel at Pearl Harbor were caught off guard. The Pacific Fleet was anchored in a state of readiness that did not anticipate an aerial assault of this magnitude. The prevailing mindset on both sides reflected the era's strategic doctrines. The Japanese relied heavily on their air power, believing it could deliver a decisive blow that would demoralize American forces. The U.S., on the other hand, underestimated the effectiveness of Japanese carrier-based aircraft. American military manuals emphasized battleship supremacy, leading to a failure to adapt to the rapidly evolving nature of naval warfare. This blind spot would prove catastrophic on that fateful morning. As tensions escalated in the months leading up to the attack, diplomatic efforts were underway, but they were fraught with miscommunication and mistrust. The Japanese government sought to negotiate while simultaneously preparing for war. The U.S. viewed these diplomatic overtures with skepticism, interpreting them as stalling tactics. This dichotomy of expectations created a volatile environment where both nations operated under fundamentally different assumptions about the other's intentions and capabilities. On December 7th, the Japanese launched their attack with a clear objective: to neutralize the American Pacific Fleet. They believed that a successful strike would allow them to expand their territorial claims without facing immediate American retaliation. However, the psychological impact of this attack would reverberate far beyond its intended strategic goals. The belief that they could achieve a swift victory would soon clash with the realities of American resilience. As the planes took off from the Japanese carriers, their pilots were fueled by a sense of purpose. They were determined to alter the course of history, convinced that this act of aggression would secure Japan's dominance in the Pacific. On the American side, the unpreparedness and disbelief would soon transform into shock and anger as the attack unfolded. The contrasts between their expectations and the unfolding reality would shape the narrative of the war to come. In the aftermath of the attack, both nations were forced to confront the consequences of their miscalculations. The Japanese victory, though significant in the short term, would sow the seeds of their eventual downfall. The American response, fueled by a newfound sense of unity and purpose, would lead to a military mobilization unlike any seen before. The events at Pearl Harbor would ultimately redefine the landscape of global conflict. The critical factor that contributed to Japan's defeat was their underestimation of American resilience and industrial capacity. In the days following the attack on Pearl Harbor, Japanese leaders believed they had delivered a crippling blow to the United States. They underestimated the American spirit and determination to recover from such a devastating assault. This cultural blind spot became evident as the United States rallied its resources and rallied its citizens, turning grief into resolve. Japanese military doctrine prioritized rapid, decisive action, believing that a single, well-executed attack could determine the outcome of a conflict. They failed to recognize that the United States, far from being a passive victim, possessed an industrial base capable of producing vast quantities of military equipment. In the wake of Pearl Harbor, American factories transformed to meet the demands of war. This ability to mobilize quickly and effectively was a fundamental aspect that Japanese planners overlooked. Moreover, Japan's reliance on surprise attacks blinded them to the potential for American adaptation. The United States swiftly analyzed the tactics employed during the assault and adjusted its strategies accordingly. Within months, American naval forces began to implement new defensive measures, enhancing their readiness for subsequent engagements. This adaptability showcased a significant cultural and strategic difference between the two nations. The Japanese leadership also failed to grasp the importance of public morale. While they believed that a quick victory would demoralize the Americans, they did not anticipate the unifying effect it would have on the U.S. population. The attack galvanized American citizens, fostering a sense of patriotism and determination to support the war effort. This cultural response, rooted in a deep-seated belief in democracy, was something Japan did not fully comprehend. As the war progressed, the Japanese military continued to operate under the assumption that they could achieve victory through sheer force. They underestimated the significance of American intelligence and the ability to adapt strategies based on real-time information. The United States began to decipher Japanese codes, gaining insight into their plans and movements. This intelligence advantage would play a crucial role in the eventual turning of the tide in the Pacific theater. Furthermore, Japan's limited resources and industrial capabilities became increasingly apparent as the war dragged on. The initial successes in the Pacific were overshadowed by logistical challenges and the inability to sustain prolonged military campaigns. American production capabilities, coupled with effective supply chain management, allowed the U.S. to outlast Japan in a war of attrition. This fundamental miscalculation contributed to Japan's eventual defeat. The psychological aspect of warfare also played a significant role. Japan's leadership was convinced that their initial triumph at Pearl Harbor would instill fear and hesitation in America. Instead, it ignited a fierce determination to retaliate. The U.S. response, marked by a series of victories in battles such as Midway and the Coral Sea, shattered the illusion of Japanese invincibility. This shift in momentum was critical in turning the tide of the war. In the years following the attack, Japan's failure to adapt to the evolving nature of warfare became evident. While they continued to rely on traditional tactics, the United States embraced innovation and technological advancement. The development of aircraft carriers, submarines, and new weapon systems fundamentally altered naval warfare. Japan's inability to keep pace with these changes further highlighted their strategic shortcomings. Ultimately, the decisive factor that led to Japan's defeat was rooted in their inability to understand the broader implications of their actions. The attack on Pearl Harbor, rather than securing their dominance, awakened a powerful adversary. The lessons learned from this conflict would shape military strategies for generations to come, underscoring the importance of adaptability, resilience, and the capacity to learn from mistakes. The technology that played a pivotal role in altering the course of the war was the aircraft carrier. This naval innovation transformed naval warfare, allowing for the projection of air power over vast distances. The carrier enabled nations to launch airstrikes far from their home ports, shifting the balance of power at sea. The United States, after the attack on Pearl Harbor, recognized the significance of this technology and began prioritizing its development. The first technical pillar of the aircraft carrier was its mobility. Unlike traditional battleships, carriers could maneuver quickly and operate independently, providing commanders with greater tactical flexibility. This mobility allowed the U.S. Navy to deploy its forces strategically, striking at enemy installations while minimizing exposure to counterattacks. The ability to launch aircraft from a mobile platform fundamentally changed naval engagements. The second pillar was the integration of advanced aviation technology. The United States invested heavily in improving aircraft design, focusing on speed, range, and payload capacity. This emphasis on innovation resulted in the development of powerful fighter planes and bombers capable of engaging enemy forces effectively. The precision and capabilities of American aircraft became a significant factor in subsequent battles, enabling them to challenge Japanese air superiority. The third pillar was the establishment of a robust logistical and support infrastructure. The United States recognized that successful carrier operations required extensive support systems, including training, maintenance, and supply chains. This investment in logistics ensured that American carriers could sustain prolonged operations, allowing them to project power continuously. The ability to resupply and repair aircraft at sea became a critical advantage in the Pacific theater. The Japanese, while initially successful in their carrier tactics, struggled to adapt to this evolving landscape. Their reliance on battleships and traditional naval engagements left them vulnerable to the emerging dominance of aircraft carriers. The Battle of Midway, for instance, illustrated this shift. American carriers, utilizing intelligence gathered from code-breaking efforts, were able to launch a surprise attack that resulted in the sinking of 4 Japanese carriers, a devastating blow to their naval capabilities. Moreover, the limitations of Japanese aircraft became apparent as the war progressed. While their initial designs were effective, they failed to keep pace with American advancements. The United States' emphasis on versatility and technological progress allowed them to outmatch Japanese aircraft in both dogfights and strategic bombing missions. This technological gap became increasingly evident in key battles, leading to significant losses for Japan. The inability to effectively utilize aircraft carriers also hindered Japan's strategic objectives. While they attempted to replicate the success of the Pearl Harbor attack, their efforts were hampered by logistical challenges and a lack of coordination between naval and air forces. This disunity of command further underscored the strategic miscalculations that plagued the Japanese military throughout the war. As the conflict continued, the significance of carrier warfare became undeniable. The United States demonstrated its ability to adapt and innovate, while Japan found itself increasingly reliant on outdated tactics. This technological disparity ultimately shifted the balance of power in favor of the Allies, leading to a series of American victories across the Pacific. In summary, the aircraft carrier emerged as a transformative force in naval warfare. Its mobility, advanced aviation technology, and logistical support capabilities provided the United States with a decisive edge over Japan. The Japanese failure to recognize and adapt to this shift in naval strategy contributed significantly to their defeat, underscoring the importance of technological innovation in determining the outcome of conflicts. On the morning of June 4, 1942, the Battle of Midway unfolded in a vast expanse of the Pacific Ocean. The sun glinted off the water, and the air was thick with anticipation as American forces prepared to defend their position against a formidable Japanese fleet. With the memory of Pearl Harbor fresh in their minds, U.S. commanders were determined to turn the tide of the war. The battle commenced as Japanese aircraft launched from their carriers, intent on delivering a decisive blow to the American forces. However, what the Japanese did not realize was that American intelligence had deciphered their plans. As the first wave of Japanese bombers approached Midway, American fighters were already in position, ready to intercept the incoming threat. The element of surprise had shifted, and the psychological shock was palpable on both sides. In the midst of the chaos, American pilots soared through the sky, their engines roaring as they engaged in fierce dogfights with Japanese planes. The sound of gunfire echoed over the ocean, mingling with the cries of pilots as they maneuvered through the clouds. Despite being outnumbered, the American forces executed their strategies with precision. Leveraging their newfound understanding of carrier warfare, the tide of the battle turned dramatically as American dive bombers descended upon the Japanese carriers. In a matter of minutes, they unleashed a hail of bombs, striking with deadly accuracy. The first carrier was hit, followed by another, and the Japanese fleet began to realize the gravity of their situation. The psychological shock of the unfolding disaster weighed heavily on their commanders, who had assumed a swift victory was within their grasp. The battle raged on, with explosions lighting up the sky and smoke billowing from the damaged Japanese carriers. As American forces celebrated their successes, the reality of the situation began to sink in for the Japanese. They had underestimated their adversary, and the loss of 4 carriers marked a turning point in the Pacific War. The psychological impact of this defeat would resonate throughout the Japanese command structure, leading to a profound reassessment of their strategies. In the days following the battle, the United States emerged with a newfound confidence. The victory at Midway not only boosted morale, but also solidified the belief that the tide had turned against Japan. American forces rallied, emboldened by their success and driven by a determination to reclaim control of the Pacific. The lessons learned from Midway would shape subsequent engagements. The U.S. Navy recognized the importance of intelligence and adaptability, focusing on refining their tactics to exploit weaknesses in the Japanese strategy. This victory also marked the beginning of a series of offensive operations that would eventually lead to Japan's downfall. As the smoke cleared over Midway, the American forces stood resolute, their victory a testament to their resilience and determination. The battle not only altered the course of the war, but also cemented the United States' position as a dominant naval power. The psychological shock of this defeat would reverberate throughout Japan, ultimately leading to their strategic decline. The Battle of Midway became a defining moment, illustrating that the outcomes of war are not solely determined by initial successes, but by the ability to adapt, learn, and respond to challenges. The lessons of this battle would resonate for years to come, shaping military strategies and redefining the nature of warfare in the Pacific. The arithmetic of victory in the Pacific theater during World War II is stark and revealing. After the attack on Pearl Harbor, the United States mobilized its industrial might, producing staggering quantities of military equipment. By 1944, American factories churned out approximately 100,000 aircraft annually, a figure that dwarfed Japanese production capabilities. This numerical advantage would have profound consequences on the battlefield. In terms of naval strength, the US had approximately 24 aircraft carriers by the end of the war, while Japan had only 10. This disparity in carrier numbers allowed the United States to project air power across the Pacific, executing strategies that overwhelmed Japanese forces. The ability to launch multiple strikes from various locations significantly increased the effectiveness of American military operations, while Japan struggled to maintain their forces. The tonnage of ships produced further underscores this advantage. The U.S. Navy launched more than 1,500 ships, including battleships, cruisers, and destroyers, compared to Japan's production of around 500 ships during the same period. This overwhelming logistical superiority allowed American forces to sustain prolonged engagements and replace losses far more effectively than the Japanese. In terms of resource consumption, the United States averaged about 150 million gallons of aviation fuel per month by 1944. This capacity allowed for extensive air operations, ensuring that American pilots had the necessary resources to maintain air superiority. In comparison, Japan faced significant fuel shortages, limiting their ability to conduct sustained air campaigns. This lack of resources became increasingly critical as the war dragged on. The impact of these numbers translates directly into battlefield consequences. For example, the ability to deploy naval forces rapidly translated into tactical advantages in key battles. The US could respond to Japanese movements with greater speed and flexibility, allowing them to engage in surprise attacks or defensive operations as needed. This adaptability was crucial in shifting the balance of power in the Pacific. Furthermore, the American industrial output translated into a significant increase in ground forces as well. The US mobilized over 16 million troops during the war, compared to Japan's total mobilization of around 6 million. This numerical superiority in manpower allowed the United States to engage in large-scale land operations, overwhelming Japanese defenses in critical campaigns such as Guadalcanal and the Philippines. The logistics of supply chains also played a vital role. The United States established a sophisticated network to transport troops and equipment across the vast distances of the Pacific. This logistical capability ensured that American forces were well equipped and supported, allowing them to maintain momentum in their campaigns. Conversely, Japan's supply lines were stretched thin, hampering their ability to sustain operations. In summary, the arithmetic of victory in the Pacific Theater reveals a clear picture of American superiority in production, resources, and logistics. The staggering numbers reflect a strategic advantage that Japan could not overcome. Understanding these metrics provides insight into the dynamics of warfare and the critical factors that ultimately determined the outcome of the conflict. The systemic consequences of the attack on Pearl Harbor and the subsequent battles in the Pacific were profound, reshaping military doctrines and international relations for decades to come. The attack shattered the myth of Japanese invincibility, leading to a comprehensive reassessment of military strategies on both sides. For the United States, it marked a pivotal point in its evolution from isolationism to a global superpower. In the immediate aftermath of Pearl Harbor, the US military underwent significant changes in its approach to warfare. The lessons learned from the attack led to a greater emphasis on intelligence gathering and inter-service cooperation. The establishment of organizations dedicated to code-breaking and reconnaissance became essential components of American military strategy, reflecting a shift towards a more proactive and informed approach to conflict. Furthermore, the success of carrier warfare at Midway and subsequent battles solidified the aircraft carrier's role as the centerpiece of naval power. This shift in focus prompted nations worldwide to re-evaluate their naval capabilities, leading to an arms race in carrier technology. The lessons of the Pacific War would influence naval strategies for generations, emphasizing the importance of air power in maritime conflicts. The ideological implications of the war extended beyond military strategies. The United States emerged from World War II with a renewed commitment to promoting democracy and containing the spread of authoritarian regimes. The experience of fighting against the expansionist policies of the Axis powers galvanized American citizens and policymakers alike, shaping post-war foreign policy for decades. In Japan, the defeat at Midway and the subsequent loss of the war led to a profound transformation of its political landscape. The fall of the militaristic government and the emergence of a democratic state marked a significant shift in Japanese society. The post-war era saw Japan embracing pacifism, enshrined in its constitution, as it sought to redefine its role on the global stage. The economic consequences of the war were equally significant. The United States emerged as the world's dominant economic power, with a booming economy fueled by wartime production. This economic strength would facilitate the establishment of international institutions aimed at promoting stability and cooperation, such as the United Nations and the International Monetary Fund. In contrast, Japan faced the daunting task of rebuilding its economy in the wake of devastation. The Marshall Plan and subsequent American aid played a crucial role in Japan's recovery, allowing it to transition from a war-torn nation to one of the world's leading economies. This transformation redefined Japan's position in global affairs, emphasizing economic cooperation over militaristic expansion. The legacy of Pearl Harbor and the Pacific War also shaped public perceptions of warfare. The experience of total war, with its accompanying loss of life and destruction, led to a re-evaluation of military engagement in subsequent conflicts. The lessons learned from the Pacific Theater emphasized the importance of diplomacy, negotiation, and the need to consider the broader implications of military action. As the world moved into the Cold War era, the consequences of the Pacific War continued to resonate. The ideological divisions that emerged during this period were influenced by the experiences of World War II and the lessons drawn from the conflict. The U.S. commitment to containing communism was shaped by the desire to prevent the rise of authoritarian regimes, reflecting the lessons learned from the battles against fascism and militarism. In conclusion, the systemic consequences of the attack on Pearl Harbor and the Pacific War reshaped military doctrines, international relations, and societal values. The lessons learned during this tumultuous period would influence global dynamics for generations, highlighting the enduring impact of history on contemporary conflicts and the importance of understanding the past. Reflecting on the attack on Pearl Harbor and the ensuing battles in the Pacific, it becomes clear that the true nature of warfare extends beyond individual events. The question of how a surprise attack could unfold in a seemingly secure environment transforms into an understanding of the broader systemic factors at play. It wasn't the best attack that won, but the best system of resilience and adaptation. As we explore the dynamics of modern warfare, one question remains: how will the lessons of history shape our understanding of future conflicts?